I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and we have a great relationship with Jiffy, and so we'll talk a little bit about how we do our labor and how we work at Forrester Greenhouse. We'll give you a little bit of history first. We're in Carleton, Michigan. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Forrester Greenhouse. Been in business since 1976. We're in Carleton, Michigan. 18 acres wholesale grower. We do 85% propagation, young plants, and 15% of our business is the what we call the grower ready. That's kind of the term we use now. Finished, I guess, is kind of the more common term. Annually, here at Forrester, we produce 50 million liners a year. For anybody that knows the young plant business, that's a pretty big number. We are a proven winner propagator, and we are the largest proven winner propagator in the entire world. We have our North American partners and proven winners, which is actually globally, but as far as across the whole entire world, we are the largest producer. So 50 million plugs that we produce annually, and so when we talk about maximizing production, that's a pretty big term. It's pretty big. For myself, 25 years, I've been in the horticulture industry. Prior to working at Forrester, I was at Heartland Growers in Westfield, Indiana. I was there for 12 years, and I'm on my 13th year at Forrester. Basically for me, I've been specialized in production, not really a trained grower per se. My degree is in accounting, business, and I have had the pleasure of being in very high production positions where usually a lot of labor force and high manufacturing type production. So when I was asked to talk about that today, it's something I really enjoy, and also talk about how that relates to our relationship with Jiffy Performa. So when we talk about this idea of maximizing production, the question that we go into this year asking, when I started, it wasn't quite 50 million when I started 13 years ago, excuse me. But for this past season, we asked ourselves that question. It's like, how do we produce 50 million liners? Just to give you an idea on that, 50 million top quality liners, and we do it efficiently with high efficiency. We have quite a few different pieces to what we produce when we produce proven winners. One being that we say per year, but the truth of the matter is that we're producing 50 million liners in less than 100 days. You do the breakdown on the math, and that is about 500,000 liners a day, roughly. Break that down into the type of trays that we do, the propagation trays. It's almost 6,000 trays a day, which is a very labor intensive project for us. And there again, it goes kind of into that forte of that high output production. Now at the same time, everything that we produce is 5 to 8 week crops. So that means stuff's not around very long. So everything that we do has to happen quickly and has to happen on time. There is really no getting behind when we do young plant production. The other thing that's kind of unusual about Forrester that we do within our industry is that all our trays are sold at 100%. What that means is, for those of you that maybe are not as familiar with young plant production, is that when I sell you a tray of plants that's 84 cells, I'm guaranteeing you 84 plants. We do not do what we call down counting. Okay, so that basically means that not only are we reproducing all this material, it basically has to be perfect. And besides that, we are the largest proven winner producer. So it's our name, it's our brand, and we are the largest producer of it. So a little bit of pressure there, not only just for what we call the high output production and being able to do this, but the quality has to be there as well. So some pretty good stipulations. And when I came up in 2000 and started working at Forrester, it was quite the challenge. I really enjoyed the idea of how do we do this large scale production, very labor intense. I think I missed that bullet point, but it's also very seasonally intensive. We have 120 full-time employees and we have 180 seasonal. So we literally have, well, 50% more seasonal employees than we do full-time. So there's quite a bit of management that goes into that. And you're talking about bringing people in, producing this product at a high rate. It's all handwork. There is some automation, but as far as the actual sticking of the product, it's handwork. So bringing in these people, training them, how do you produce 100% product? So for us at Forrester, the real bottom line to what we do, and bottom line to my job, is it's about, we measure, we understand output. We understand the details of our company, and if that's something I can, share or preach about, is knowing the details of what you're doing, your output, your throughput, how much you're producing, the cost of what you're producing. Too many people have this, we're not tracking or we don't track the numbers close enough. I'm not sure how they make good, honest business decisions without knowing these things. Especially at the scale of company we are, data has to be provided for everything we do. Production, data throughout. One of the ways that we do that, labor tracking. Forrester, we do a very intense labor tracking system. It's involved with barcode scanning, our in-house software system that we use. We work with innovative software solutions out of Grand Rapids. The software that we use is called Picus, and it was really built on the platform of labor tracking. Very much based around the same thing that a lot of the auto manufacturers or these large manufacturers use for tracking, for costs, for labor, for output. So we really designed the system based on manufacturing, not necessarily just greenhouse, but handling labor like a manufacturer, handling output like that. All output and labor is tracked. It's tracked individually per employee. Everybody is measured. Everybody is not only punching the clock. Myself, even as a salaried employee, I'm always punching a clock because what we're doing is we're tracking my time. We're tracking my time based on how much time every employee puts into the production of the crop, right? So we want to know every cent that goes into that from a labor aspect, right? So that other aspect we're talking about is not only this maximum type production, but also knowing our costs and how we handle our cost. We incentivize our labor. That's a big piece of what we do. The reason we can do that is because we're measuring. We measure all our data. We treat it like a manufacturer. And yeah, we're at this high level of output, this 50 million liners, but at any level this can be done. And if I could say one thing about that, it's like, don't ever think you can't measure what you're doing and then it's not a necessity. Again, it's the basis for every decision we make, and we couldn't do the kind of output we do or be the kind of producer without that data. It helps us with assessing automation. I know Jenny Miller talked about the automation that they use for their industry. For us, the data is what helps us when we decide to make automation choices. They're not just random choices, oh, we think we need a machine. It's based on data, output, cost. Can we justify the machinery? They're all very wise business decisions, just like a manufacturer. All labor is forecasted in detail. We use 6 24 station sticking lines. So the part that we do automate for sticking cuttings is how we move the product to the employees. The art of sticking itself is very much a hand job still, like how it's basically produced. The sticking's done by hand. So it's still very labor intensive. So it has to be managed quite a bit. We talk about all this data that we use for managing the labor side of it. How do we handle that? There's also the plant side of it, right? So how do we use that data for the plants, for also coming back on the labor again, the costing. As I said, I'm not necessarily a trained grower per se, but the plant information that we use is what's critical to our production, our output, and each item that we do, how does that affect the labor? Because two products may not be stuck the same way, or we may not handle things the same way. Things get moved certain more times, but we track that data in the detail because it's there again. It tells us how we handle our labor, how we handle the production side of it. I'll give you some examples. So not only we talk about the output tracking by our personnel, but also about each variety. And we do over 500 varieties within our proven winner generas. Everything is tracked in detail by every variety that we produce, every genera, from a production standpoint, how the labor's handled on it. So we're accurately putting costing. I mean, this is such an important thing that I always challenge people to say as producers is, can you tell me what you have, what is your labor into that product? I think that's one of those questions that do you really ever get a straight answer on? For me, when I started at Forrester, Carleton being more of a finished producer, not necessarily into the young plant propagation, definitely a big change. Used to the high output production, but when I came to work for Tom Smith, our owner, he definitely taught me a lot about the expectations and the details. When he talked about labor planning, for me, prior to coming to Forrester, it was like, okay, we're going to need probably hire about 30 people this spring, to get the job done. That's not even in their vocabulary up there. I have to tell how many people per week that we need and forecast the labor across 300 people within an accuracy of maybe 2 people. And that's based on what we think attendance will be. And we even incentivize attendance to keep that number really secure. But yeah, we actually produce or forecast the labor to that kind of detail. So we talk about it with the plants as well, how we produce based on the plant genera. We talk about the young plant cuttings. They're all stuck different. They take different labor to do how they propagate. This is one of our typical plant trays. You can see a lot of information we put on a tray. That's for our use, for tracking, for costing. We receive a lot of our cuttings from what we call offshore suppliers. So we're tracking the cuttings that come in all the way through the process. So there again, it's all about all this data collection, right? Being very specific, knowing what we have into the product. Tracking of labor costing is done throughout the entire plant cycle, right? So we're not just talking about the production side. If we want to really know all the labor that goes into that, it's all the way across the board. We receive our cuttings in, the lab work that's done on the cuttings, our in-house lab work. We talk about production. We have a quality assurance department. They're the ones that go out, they'll do the plugging, they make sure that we have that 100% yield. The growing, every detail of our growing, chemical applications, labor for watering, how much water does it take? All that detail is tracked. Same way, the labor it takes when somebody goes out there and they're going to spray that product, they are clocked into that. Everything is tracked. All the way through the shipping process. We know how much it costs to pick that plant up, to put it in a box, or to put it on a cart and send it out the door. All the details are tracked, enabling us for this maximized production, but at the same time we know our cost, right? How do we keep their costs down so that we keep ourselves in business and remain profitable? So where does Jiffy come in? That's why I'm here, right? So I was thinking about this. It's like, man, this is good salesman training, but this isn't fluff. This is that actual, what we're talking about, data, hard data to support why do we make these business decisions. Because I know when I talk to people about what the product we use, which is the Performa filled trays, usually the first reaction to even our own partner companies, it's too expensive, can't use that stuff, too expensive. So I have to ask the question, so how do you know that? Well, it's just too expensive. Really? I don't know how those decisions get made without having the proper data. It's a gut reaction, right? Because we see that price on the bottom line. So for us, there's a number of things that through our costing we've learned that help us. So we work out a program, Mike's our salesman, where we bring in, how many trays we do this year? Mike, 130,000 I can't even remember. Yeah, Mr. Detail right here. I can't even remember the number. So, well over 100. It's like 140,000. Over 200. See, it's all about the details. 200,000. Anyways, so big part of our production is done in the Performa filled trays. It's something that we've worked out for a number of years, working with Jiffy. All of these decisions that we've made, though, is supported by our data. Tray handling versus tray filling time. How many people really measure that? How long does it take us to make soil, prepare the soil, run the machinery, fill the trays, handle the trays, versus I get a just-in-time type inventory delivered to my door from Jiffy Performa. Keeping 2 weeks of inventory versus a yearly peat moss purchase, yearly peat storage, right? Probably not a detail a lot of people think about. There's dollars there. A big one for us when we talk about tracking the labor, pre-dibbled trays, right? So when we buy our Performa trays, they have what we call a dibble, the hole that we stick the cutting in, is already formed into the tray. We have machinery that does that when we have trays filled with soil, but it takes that employee, has to literally put that cutting in and just that small pinch, but they have to basically secure the soil. Sorry, get my microphone right here. They have to secure the soil around the cutting. Okay, well, what's that take, a second? 2 seconds? Yeah, but when it takes 4 seconds to stick the cutting, does it add up? You know, if it takes 4 seconds to stick a cutting and it takes 2 seconds to prepare the soil or to, move the soil around, you're talking 30, 40, 50% of your labor because I'm using soil versus Performa. That's kind of one I think Mike knows about well. We talk a lot about that, but there's still even more aspects that go into our decision around that. Quality assurance department, what happens after production? Cost to plug tray per cell, plugging labor savings that we save using stable media. What's the yield? Do we get a better yield when we use Performa? Well, we know that, and we know specifically what generas we use it for. Timing of product, our ability to handle it earlier because it's in a stable media. Time is money, and when you track that kind of data, that becomes very important. We'll talk about that in the next piece as well. So on the growing side, what's the growing cost per week? Right, it's a big thing we talk about. Cost in propagation, out of propagation. Many products we're actually able to cut out time because we use Performa. Certain generas we can cut 1 or 2 weeks out of, which when you talk about something that's a 5-week grow cycle and you cut a week out of the time, you just cut 20% of your growing cost out. So knowing the data allows us to make wise decisions around using the product. It isn't that emotional, it's just too expensive. So when you do 500 varieties of product, 120 generas, how do you get items that may not perform alike? How do you able to get time secured? So you've got a 5-week crop, you cut time off here, maybe you've got a crop that takes longer to propagate. You're able to even out our crops using Performa because of the stabilized media. There again, anytime you talk about a week or time out in the greenhouse, you're talking about dollars. And 5-week crop, even an 8-week crop, that's a large percentage of your time. And when we know what literally that footprint, yeah, we're an 18-acre greenhouse, we even use some off-site growers, but I could tell you per square feet what that takes up per week and what we can save by cutting a week off. And there's a lot of flexibility with that, especially as a young plant supplier. Kind of just to wrap it up, and then if anybody's got any questions, one of the things that's really been a joy with the system that we do and being able to have such a good handle on it is Forrester has been able to handle the growth that we have, and we've been very blessed to have great sales. Very thankful for that. From 13 years ago that I started with the company, we've never had a year that we didn't have increased sales, and I think that's a pretty remarkable thing to say. knowing the ups and downs of the industry, weather, all the things that go into that. But not only do we meet these goals that we do from having the high output, the high quality production, but we're able to aggressively plan more because we have such good data. We're able to ask ourselves, and this has been one that we've put out there to say, what happens in the next 5 years if we doubled our production? What would it be like to do 100 million liners? Well, for us, it's basically using the data we have to say, here's how that's done. It's not this, can we do it? It's how we do it. And I think that a lot of it is, we do a 5-year objective of 100% increase in output while maintaining all of our key initiatives. At any size production, understanding and calculating these kind of details that we talk about. How do you measure? It's an absolute necessity, and I think for our industry to thrive, it's definitely a necessity. I feel that I've been very blessed to work at a place like Forrester that not only encourages that, they've helped me to get a better handle on that. We wouldn't be able to survive in the industry that we do. The propagation, plant cuttings, specifically branded product, it's still a very competitive market. We are definitely by no means the cheapest product on the market. We're a lot of times known to be some of the most expensive. And so with that, we're developing that brand. So this kind of data helps us back that up. So we have to make very good informed decisions and stay profitable. With a good handle on these items, when we evaluate inputs like media, we talk about Jiffy Performance, things like that. We talk about automation, how we handle labor, becomes a lot easier, and you can knock out some of that first impression of high cost, right? So we can do a proper evaluation. Using the proper capturing of data, high output and first class quality can be achieved in tandem with the cost containment. Measure and apply, and we know for next year, the game plan is we're planning on at least a 10% increase, 55 million liners. We already have a plan on how that's going to work, and literally I'll be liberal, I'll say November 1st, I will have planned out by week how many people it will take to handle all aspects of that. We'll have our budgets in place, and we'll have a game plan on how to produce that. And those are the key necessities to being able to do that kind of output, that kind of efficiency.